You're not a team player. Vivian! That was exactly what he said before reaching for the termination letter. Already printed. Already signed. 3 minutes. That's how long my first conversation with the new CEO lasted. Just long enough for him to misjudge everything that mattered. But that wasn't his real mistake. His real mistake was assuming I didn't already know what he had done in Frankfurt. It was 10:35 in the morning on a Monday, 3 days since he arrived. Our new CEO, the board called him a strategic disruptor. I called him what he was, a man in a rush to clean house and write his own legacy. I'd seen them before. Different suits. Same smell of ego. He stood when I entered. Barely. No handshake, just a nod. "Vivian," he said. "Let's not waste each other's time." I sat down across from him, the red folder resting on my knees. I didn't speak first. He did. 8 years. That's a long time to do the same thing. Process reviews, compliance oversight. Necessary, sure, but not where we're headed. He sounded rehearsed, words polished smooth like stones. "I'm restructuring the leadership pipeline. I need people who can think fast, move faster. You're good at your job, I'm told, but you're not a fit for where we're going." There it was. He didn't ask about my work, my insights, the risks I flagged in Q4, the system I helped rebuild after the 2018 crisis. None of it mattered. He reached for a paper on his desk, already signed. I'm terminating your position effective immediately. HR will follow up. You'll be treated fairly, I assure you." 3 minutes. That's how long it took to be erased. I didn't flinch, didn't argue. I simply reached into my bag, pulled out the red folder, and placed it gently on his desk. He didn't touch it. "I won't need that," he said. I looked at him, really looked. His fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted his cufflink. He was confident, but not calm. I stood, smoothed my skirt, and turned toward the door. As I walked out, I didn't mention that the contents of that folder, detailed discrepancies, questionable vendor accounts, and one flagged international transfer, had already been sent. One to corporate legal, one to the firm's largest client, and one to a journalist I used to have coffee with every Friday 5 years ago. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. But Harold McCullen had just fired the one person who knew exactly what he was hiding, and the clock had already started ticking. It started with a blinking light. 3 days before Harold McCullen would fire me, I was sitting in my office, 3rd floor, West Wing, tucked away from the executive noise, when my monitor chimed with a new message. I glanced at the clock. 7:28 in the morning. Too early for vendor spam. Too late for internal updates. I clicked. The subject line was blank. The sender used her old company address. Not a generic Gmail, but a Kestrel Finance domain. The one they shut down after she left. That domain. I hadn't seen it in years. And that name. Jennifer Moreno, Jen, my friend. The quiet one from risk assessment at Kestrel and Finch. The same company Harold came from. The same company he left without a trace. But Jen had disappeared too. Cut off all contact. The last time I heard from her was 2 years ago, when she called me in tears after being pushed out during a department restructure. We'd promised to stay in touch. But she vanished. No LinkedIn updates. No holiday emails, nothing. So why now? I clicked it open. One line. "Don't let him do it again." No greeting, no signature, no attachments. Just those 7 words. I stared at the screen, unsure if I'd imagined it. I refreshed the page. Still there? But the timestamp was strange. 6:03 a.m., sent nearly 90 minutes before it hit my inbox. I tried replying. "Jen, is this really you? What's going on?" The message bounced. User not found. I checked the server log. No sign of the email on the company-wide activity list. It was as if it bypassed every filter. My fingers hovered over the phone. I still had her number saved, though I hadn't dialed it in years. I tried. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Of course. By 8:15, I was sitting in the break room, coffee untouched, replaying every word I remembered from our last call. There's something wrong with the numbers. Viv, they're moving money. It's not just creative accounting anymore. She'd been talking about a partner project that Harold personally led, a set of offshore accounts labeled regional grants. She never proved it, but she was scared. She said she saw him sign something that didn't match the client statements, and now, out of nowhere, I get a ghost message from her account, warning me, don't let him do it again. Again. The word echoed back at my desk. I pulled Harold's public profile, just as polished as I remembered. Transformational executive. Turned around underperforming units. Known for strategic streamlining. All buzzwords. Not a single note about his quiet exit from Kestrel. Not a single mention of why their third-quarter review vanished from the investor site that year. But I remembered. They delayed publishing their Q3 until after he left, claimed it was due to auditing misalignments. I dismissed it then, a blip. Companies reshuffle all the time. But now I had a name, a warning, a gut that wouldn't calm down. I pulled out an old thumb drive from my drawer, one I used to keep Jen's training modules, just out of habit. I plugged it in. There were 4 folders. 3 were blank, but one, Archive Risk Finch, still had files. I opened it. Dozens of PDFs, internal review templates, vendor blacklists, memos. One stood out. Client transfer variance, 2Q, J, M. I clicked. Page after page of numbers. Transfers marked legitimate, yet showing identical routing patterns to inactive accounts. The names of project managers didn't match system logs. Harold's name wasn't on any document, but his initials were on the sign-off sheet at the end. By lunchtime, the anxiety had turned to something else. Purpose. I printed the sheet. If he was starting it again. I needed proof, not just intuition. I needed to catch it before it took root. But mostly, I needed to know why now? Why send that message, if it even was from her, after all this time? I stared at the line again. Don't let him do it again. That wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. I hadn't spoken to Jen in nearly 2 years. Not since she vanished from the financial world like smoke through a vent. No goodbye, no farewell post, not even a new job title on LinkedIn. She'd just disappeared. But when I saw that message, 7 words from her old domain, warning me not to let Harold do it again, something deep inside cracked open and stayed open. So I called. Her number was still in my phone, buried under J. Moreno, Kestrel. I held my breath as it rang. Once, twice. Click. Hello? It was her voice, older, rougher, like it had been living underground. I hesitated. Jen, it's Vivian. A pause, a deep exhale. I was wondering how long it would take. Was it you? I asked quietly. The email? Another pause. Longer this time. Yes, she said. I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of my desk. He's here, Harold. He's our new CEO. I know, Jen replied. I've been watching. Her tone was flat, but I could hear the bitterness hiding just beneath it, the kind that doesn't fade with time, only sinks deeper. We moved to encrypted chat 2 minutes later. I didn't ask how she knew to prepare for this. Jen had always been 3 steps ahead of the game. Even when we were both just analysts juggling spreadsheets and cold coffee in the compliance war zone. He's doing it again, I typed. Setting up shadow client accounts. Same pattern. And I found a flagged project that doesn't even exist. Of course, she replied. He never got caught. Just redirected. They swept it all under NDA. I paused. Did you ever keep any of it? The cursor blinked. Then, you really want to see it? Yes, I typed. 15 minutes later, I had a file sitting on my encrypted drive labeled KF_client_4 B_variance_June 2019.pdf. I opened it slowly, my palms cold against the keyboard. The document looked like a basic vendor contract, but then I saw the inconsistencies, small, subtle, but glaring to a trained eye. Client name, Linden Group Authorized Contact. TBD funding source, Region 4, discretionary grant allocation. That last one. Discretionary grants didn't exist at Kestrel. Scroll to the bottom. Jen messaged, I did, under authorized by. It was signed in smooth black ink, H, MC, Cullen title, VP, Strategic Deployment. It was real, and it was rotten. You kept this all these years? I asked. I shouldn't have, she said. They made me sign an exit package that banned me from retaining any files. But I knew, somewhere down the line, he'd try it again, and I knew no one would believe me without proof. I sat there, the weight of the scan pressing against my lungs. It wasn't just a smoking gun, it was a blueprint for fraud. But why now? I asked. Why risk contacting me? Because he's gotten bolder, she said. He didn't learn anything, he just learned how to hide better. And because, she hesitated, because I owe you. It hit me then. In 2017, I'd vouched for Jen during an internal audit when one of her flagged reports caused chaos. The board had nearly let her go, but I stood up and defended her data, said she had integrity, accuracy, insight. She never forgot that. Be careful, Viv, she added. He's not stupid. He doesn't clean his own mess. He just makes sure someone else gets blamed. I leaned back in my chair, the contract still glowing on my screen. I've already been fired. I typed. There was a pause. Then she replied, Then you've got nothing left to lose. She was right. The scan in front of me wasn't just a record, it was leverage. I made 3 copies. One went into a secure backup, one to a contact in legal I trusted, and one I slipped into the red folder. The same red folder I'd carry into Harold's office 2 days later, where he wouldn't read a word. But soon, someone else would. The moment I opened the quarterly ledger, something twisted in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was colder than that, like discovering fingerprints on your bedroom mirror that you didn't leave. Because the fingerprints here weren't on glass. They were in the numbers. That morning, I requested temporary access to our internal payment records under the pretext of preparing transition notes. I knew my credentials would be revoked soon after the termination meeting, so I had a narrow window. I wasn't sure what I would find. I just followed instinct, and I found it. Buried inside the expense reports were transfers filed under vague categories, things like client development, consulting bundles, and special projects. But it wasn't the labels that struck me. It was the pattern. The exact same figure, $240,000, appeared every 14 days across different departments. Routed through what appeared to be a dormant account, I ran a deeper query, searching the last 6 months, 12 payments, all approved in under 24 hours, all tied to an internal code listed as active. But there was no name, no project lead, no correspondence trail, just a short reference tag, LGR4B827. My hands hovered over the keyboard. That code meant nothing on its own. But the alias used for the client, Linden R., snapped me back. It was the same name Jen had uncovered in the forged contract. Only this time. The spelling had changed slightly. Not Linden Group, but Linden R., just enough to escape duplication alerts in the system. That wasn't just suspicious. It was deliberate. I searched the client directory. No listing for Linden R., no contacts, no history of engagement. The system claimed the project was still in active status, but it didn't exist. The total? Over $8 million in approved payments? I sat back slowly, spine stiffening. This wasn't a mistake. This was a design. I checked vendor records next. Any signed scope of work, service agreement, or contract initiation tied to that code. Nothing came up. There were no forms, no contact logs, no billing correspondence, just a digital trail of authorization stamps. And one stood out. User identity listed as Harold McCullen admin. A chill ran down my arms. He hadn't even tried to mask it. He approved every transfer under his own name, like he was daring someone to notice, or counting on no one to care. I took a breath, then another. Then I did what I'd trained myself to do. I documented screenshots, exported logs, a printed copy of the ledger entry showing the repetitive transfers. I uploaded a password-protected version to my personal cloud, labeled under a harmless title. I kept a second copy on a flash drive, buried under unrelated folders, and I printed a clean, marked-up report. That one went into the red folder. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the ventilation system. The fluorescent lights above buzzed slightly, but the office outside my door was still. No chatter, no footsteps, just the sterile hum of a company pretending everything was fine. But everything was not fine, not anymore. I took out a sticky note and wrote just 5 words in block letters. Lyndon R. 8 million ghost. It was my anchor, proof of what I knew, and a reminder of what had to come next. This wasn't paranoia. This was precision. And the red folder? It was no longer a precaution. It was a fuse. I walked into the compliance briefing room with the red folder clutched tightly in my hand. But no one looked up. There were 5 people at the table. 4 of them had worked with me for years. One was new, just brought in by Harold, a senior director from his previous firm. They were sipping coffee, flipping through printouts, talking over each other in a low murmur. Not one paused when I entered. I had never felt like a ghost before, but in that moment, I did. I cleared my throat. Silence. I have something I need to bring forward, I said evenly. A pattern in the recent disbursements that appears to be inconsistent with internal controls. One of the women blinked. Another kept scrolling through her tablet. Then Brian Carson, Executive Director of Strategic Operations, folded his arms and leaned back. "I'm not sure why you're here, Vivian," he said, voice neutral but firm. "As of this week, your department is being restructured. Anything compliance-related should go through the new channels." I kept my eyes on him. This isn't about process. This is about a potential misappropriation of funds tied to a non-existent client. Brian raised a brow. "You're implying fraud?" "I'm showing concern," I said. He tapped his fingers against the table, the rhythm slow and deliberate. "Vivian, with all due respect, your access will be formally closed by end of day. I recommend you leave this for the new leadership to handle." There was a beat of silence. No one said anything, not even Rachel, who I'd mentored for years. I glanced down at the folder in my hand, still closed. The evidence was there. $8 million. Ghost transfers. The same structure Harold had used at his last firm. But they didn't want to see it. Not now. Maybe not ever. I didn't realize how hard I was gripping the folder until I felt my fingernails press into my palm. "I understand," I said. Brian offered a nod. Cool, polite, final. I turned and walked out. The hallway was longer than I remembered. Or maybe my legs just moved slower. As I passed the executive conference room, something caught my eye through the glass wall. Harold. He was inside, standing near the head of the table, speaking to 2 other men in suits. They were laughing, relaxed. There was a laptop open in front of him, and a stack of folders beside it. I almost kept walking, but then I saw my name. The folder at the top of the pile had a tab that read Vivian Cross, Personnel file. I stopped. One of the men noticed me and glanced my way. Harold didn't turn around, but I saw him gesture toward the folder, tapping his finger against the label like it was a game piece on a board. I didn't move. I didn't blink. They were looking into me, dissecting my record, preparing a narrative, likely before I could finish writing my own. I walked back to my office in silence. No one stopped me. No one asked what was wrong. The red folder felt heavier now, like it knew it was being hunted too. I sat at my desk, stared at the wall, and listened. Somewhere down the hallway, a printer kicked on. A door clicked shut. The world kept moving, like nothing had shifted. But everything had. This wasn't a warning anymore. It was a message. They didn't need to disprove me. They just needed to isolate me, make me irrelevant, silenced before I could finish my sentence. And Harold? He wasn't just brushing me aside. He was preparing to erase me entirely. But what he didn't know was this. I had already shared the folder. I had already given the story away. And I was done waiting for permission. The day the tickets were refunded. I didn't cry. I just stared at the email confirmation. Then closed my laptop and sat in silence. Pretending the silence meant I had made the right choice. It was supposed to be our first real vacation in over 3 years. Just me and Ava. 4 nights in Charleston. Beachside rental. No calls. No reports. No midnight emails asking for numbers that should have been requested weeks before. Ava had circled the dates in pink on the fridge calendar. She even packed her suitcase a week early, stuffing it with sundresses and the book I gave her for her 16th birthday. But the quarterly report came in 2 days late, and the numbers were a mess. The finance team had sent over incomplete data, and our CFO was overseas. The only person left to untangle the web was me. So I stayed, and Ava understood. Too well. She didn't yell. She didn't complain. She just erased the pink circle off the calendar that night without a word. Then went upstairs. I heard her door close. Soft and slow. That was worse than a slammed one. I worked 26 hours across 3 days. No overtime. No credit. No acknowledgement. I fixed the report. Reconciled the vendor codes. Flagged 2 suspicious expense entries. And submitted everything to the board liaison 48 hours before the deadline. No one said thank you. Now. A week later, I sat at my desk after the meeting with Brian. After seeing Harold with my personnel file. After realizing I had been boxed out of every decision I once led. I reached for my phone to text Ava. My hand hovered over the screen. What could I even say? I did the right thing. I'm proud of staying loyal. It was worth it. None of those were true anymore. I'd spent years building my reputation on precision, ethics, and commitment. But when the floor shifted, when Harold started rearranging the structure like a game of chess, I realized I wasn't a player. I was a piece, and I'd already been moved. That afternoon, as I sat staring blankly at the monitor, a message popped up in my inbox. No subject line, no sender name, just an audio file labeled "Play Me." I hesitated. My heart was already tight from the day, but I clicked. A voice came through, grainy, low, recorded from a distance. It was Harold. She's been here forever, knows where every file is buried. But come on, she's not leadership material. She's old furniture. You don't argue with it, you just eventually replace it. Laughter followed. At least 2 other people in the room. Male, confident, familiar. My fingers froze. Old furniture. That's what I was to him. A thing, not a person. Something you walk around, sit on, dismiss. I paused the recording, sat very still, and felt something rupture quietly inside my chest. Not rage, not tears. Something colder. Something that sat deep and hard in my ribcage. Who had sent it? Someone on the inside. Someone who wanted me to know I was being mocked or warned. I checked the metadata, scrubbed, no timestamp, no file path, just the voice, just the truth. I opened my drawer and pulled out a photograph. Ava at age 10, holding a sand dollar from our last real trip together. Her smile was wide, sunburned, real, back then. I believed hard work would shield us both, that integrity and dedication could build something lasting. But now I understood the rules had changed. This wasn't about who worked the hardest or knew the most. It was about who controlled the story. And Harold had already started rewriting mine. I looked down at the red folder, at the spreadsheet logs, at the flagged names and false accounts and approval trails. I had built this quietly, but silence hadn't protected me. I had missed a vacation. I had missed 100 little things. I had given up more than I ever realized, but I wasn't going to give up my voice. Not anymore. Not for a man who saw me as furniture. Not for a system that rewarded men like him. Not for a company that turned its head and stayed silent. I clicked forward, and I sent the audio file to 3 people. 1 to legal, 1 to a client contact, and 1 to an anonymous tip line I knew still answered. I didn't write a subject. I didn't need to. The recording would speak louder than I ever could. The receptionist barely looked up when she waved me in. "Harold's ready for you." I walked down the long carpeted hallway, with the red folder tucked under my arm. Not that it would matter now. I could already feel it, the inevitability, a strange, weightless ache in my chest. Like I was walking into a room where the ending had already been written, and all I was expected to do was act it out. Harold was seated at the far end of the conference table, a glass of water on one side, his laptop on the other. He didn't stand when I entered, didn't smile, just motioned toward the chair across from him, like I was an item on his calendar he needed to check off before lunch. I sat and waited. He didn't say hello, didn't ask how I was, didn't mention the years I had given this place, late nights, crisis meetings, saving accounts no one else wanted to touch. He just opened a folder, glanced at the top page, and began to speak in the tone of someone reading a legal disclaimer at the end of a commercial. "Vivian, after careful review of our organizational structure and upcoming strategic priorities, we've concluded that your position no longer aligns with the future direction of the company." I blinked. That was it? No mention of performance, no feedback, not even a reference to the so-called restructuring Brian had used as a shield earlier. Harold continued, his voice flat. "This is not a reflection of your work to date, but rather an evolution of leadership needs. Effective immediately, your role is being dissolved. HR will provide exit paperwork. You'll receive severance in line with company policy." I tried to speak. I opened my mouth, searching for anything, clarity, protest, even grace. But nothing came out. My throat felt like it had closed, not out of panic, but from humiliation. He hadn't even looked at me yet. 3 minutes. That's all it took to erase 8 years. He didn't ask what I knew, didn't care what I had found, didn't flinch at the red folder sitting on the corner of his desk. Unopened. Ignored. It was as if I had never existed. I looked down at my hands, folded in my lap, and realized they weren't shaking. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was frozen, somewhere between disbelief and despair, caught in the space where dignity feels impossible to retrieve. I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Why now?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. He sighed. "You're not a fit for this era." "Vivian." There it was, not a fit, not modern enough, not flexible, not bold, not loud, too precise, too careful, too much of a reminder of how the company used to work before spin and shortcuts became the business model. I swallowed. And then, Harold did something strange. He reached for his laptop, still open beside him, and closed the lid with one hand, for a second, just before the screen shut off. I saw it. A document was open, a spreadsheet, The title line was bold and unmistakable. Client Funds Transfer Schedule. My blood went cold. That file didn't belong to this meeting. It didn't belong on his screen. It belonged in a secure drive, accessed only by finance and legal. And there it was, bold, wide open, in front of him, during a termination meeting for the one person who might have recognized what it meant. He hadn't noticed I saw it. He didn't care. He'd gotten sloppy. Or maybe he thought I was already too defeated to register anything. That was his mistake. I stood slowly, pressing my palms to the table to steady myself. Harold was already glancing back at his phone. Done with the meeting before I had even left the room. No handshake, no farewell, just silence. I didn't reach for the red folder. I didn't plead with him to read it, because it wasn't for him anymore. It was for the ones who would have to clean up after him, and they were already watching. I turned and walked out, the echo of his words trailing behind me like smoke. You're not a fit for this era. Maybe not. But I knew where the bodies were buried, and I had just seen the shovel in his hands. The article dropped at 6:45 in the morning. I was pouring coffee, still in my robe, when the headline flashed across my phone screen like a flare in a dark sky. Unnamed source flags, client laundering in Fortune 500 firm. No company name, no executive named. But I didn't need it. I had written the story without ever touching a keyboard. Someone else had taken the baton. I tapped the link and scrolled. The site was a niche compliance blog, mostly read by insiders, investigators, auditors, whistleblowers. It wasn't mainstream, but it was respected. The kind of platform that didn't publish smoke unless there was fire underneath. The post was only 4 paragraphs. It spoke of internal documents hinting at false client entries, misdirected funds, and discrepancies in reported assets. It mentioned anonymous submissions, a sudden pattern of irregular transactions, and a whistleblower who had refused to be silenced. The last line hit like a pinprick to the spine. This could point to a financial manipulation effort involving upwards of $8 million over 6 months, originating from within the executive tier. I stared at the words, half expecting them to disappear. But they stayed. I sat down, the mug in my hand now completely forgotten. So someone had taken the audio, or the folder, or maybe the pattern I flagged had caught more than one person's attention. Either way, it was out there now. Not buried in a private drive, not trapped in red tape. It was alive. And that meant one thing. I wasn't alone anymore. The tension didn't fade. If anything, it sharpened. I knew how corporate damage control worked. Harold's team would already be calling legal, spinning up statements, preparing rebuttals. They'd dismiss it as hearsay, a disgruntled former employee, a misunderstanding. That would be their first move, undermine the source, which meant I had to keep quiet. For now. But it didn't mean I had to stay still. By 10:15 that morning, the internal Slack channels were humming. Compliance chat was unusually active. People were asking vague questions, curious questions. Someone posted the link. It got removed 5 minutes later. Too late. The damage had been done. I refreshed the blog's comments section. Dozens of posts. Most anonymous. Most speculating. But one stood out. It wasn't public. It came through my private company inbox, from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, no introduction, just one line. I believe you. I've seen it too. My breath caught. It was signed only with a first initial, L. I checked the sender address. It was masked, sent through a proxy relay, but the timing lined up perfectly with the Slack activity. Whoever they were. They worked here, and they knew. I typed back, slowly. Can you share what you've seen? No reply, not immediately, but the message had already changed something in me. Hope doesn't need a chorus to survive. Sometimes, all it takes is one quiet voice in the dark. I stood from the desk and walked to the window. Looking out over the parking lot of the office, I was no longer welcome in. The sun had broken through a patch of gray clouds, casting everything in that pale golden light that never seems to last. It hit me then, not as relief, but as clarity. This wasn't over, not even close. The red folder had only been the beginning. The ripple had started, and it was spreading. By the time I poured my second cup of coffee that morning, the second client had called for an internal audit. By lunchtime, the third one joined in. These weren't small names. These were our top-tier accounts, clients we'd spent years courting, contracts that took entire teams to secure, relationships polished by dinners, retreats, and half a dozen signed NDAs. And now, they wanted answers. Each inquiry came with legal language, carefully worded, neutral on the surface, but the tone underneath, ice-cold suspicion. They weren't asking for numbers. They were asking for the truth. The article had cracked the surface. But the clients? They had driven a stake through the heart. One contract demanded clarification on a list of payments made to a project labeled Linden Regional. The next asked for justification on marketing development charges, repeating every 2 weeks. The third didn't even ask. They just froze all pending payments and requested a forensic review of our shared accounts. I knew what that meant. They were preparing to walk. And Harold? He was nowhere to be seen. At 11:40, I received a message from an old colleague still inside. You didn't hear this from me, but PR is in full meltdown. Legal's been pulled out of 2 calls to draft a holding statement, and they're rechecking every contract signed in the last 6 months. It's chaos. I almost laughed, not out of joy, but from the release. The pressure that had built up for weeks, months, even years, was no longer just mine to carry. Now it was public, messy, irreversible, and the fire hadn't stopped spreading. By early afternoon, another story hit the press. This one had a name. Former Kestrel and Finch executive under scrutiny again. Patterns echo past financial misconduct. There it was. Harold's past. The scandal everyone pretended didn't exist was finally clawing its way to the surface. The media had started connecting dots. They mentioned terms like falsified vendor accounts, ghost clients, and manipulation of internal approvals. They didn't have all the proof yet, but the outline was there, and Harold's name was now stuck to it. I watched it unfold from the quiet of my home, the same kitchen where I had once canceled a vacation to clean up someone else's spreadsheet. But this wasn't mine to clean. This was his to drown in. At 3:05 in the afternoon, I got a call from a blocked number. I didn't answer. They called again. I still didn't answer, the third time. They left a voicemail. I waited, listened, and then I sat down. It was short, just one sentence. A male voice, calm, confident. He should have never underestimated you. I didn't recognize the voice, but I recognized the tone. It wasn't a warning. It was an acknowledgement. Later that evening, I got another message, this time from someone working at one of our rival firms, a woman I had met once at a conference. She didn't say much, just sent me a photo, a desk, a man in a navy suit, and right in the center, a red folder. My red folder. The same labels, the same annotations. It was sitting on the desk of the CEO of Orion Strategies, our biggest competitor. The same man Harold had once humiliated during a public bid 3 years ago. I stared at the photo, breath caught between shock and something close to satisfaction. He had it. All of it. And now, Harold's downfall wasn't just internal, it was competitive. The storm had begun as a whisper, a leak, a quiet act of defiance. But now, it was an avalanche. Clients were leaving, contracts were collapsing, and the one man who thought he could rewrite the rules was being buried by the facts he thought no one would ever notice. I closed my laptop slowly, letting the image of that red folder on the rival CEO's desk sink in. He had fired me to erase me, but he didn't realize I was just. The message came at 7:20 the next morning. It was simple. No greeting, no subject, just an invitation. Private meeting? 11 o'clock. West Boardroom. Discretion advised. It was signed with just a name. Graham Thorne, senior board member, former CFO, and one of Harold's most public defenders. A man known for speaking slowly, shaking hands firmly, and never raising his voice. He was deliberate, exacting, the kind of man who made most executives nervous. I wasn't most executives anymore, and I wasn't nervous. I was calculating at 10:57. I stood outside the boardroom door with the red folder pressed to my side. My fingers traced its edge like it was a shield. I wasn't sure what this meeting was. An interrogation? A test? Or a warning? Either way, I was ready. I opened the door. Graham was already seated at the head of the long table, a tablet resting in front of him, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. "Vivian," he said without looking up. "Please, sit." I sat. He swiped once on the tablet, then set it aside. For a moment. He simply studied me. "You've caused quite a bit of turbulence," he said. "I didn't create the storm," I replied. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't coming." His eyes didn't blink, but I saw something flicker behind them. Respect. Maybe. Or calculation. "You understand what's at stake," he said. "Better than anyone else in this room," I said. He leaned forward. "The board isn't interested in rumors or blog posts. We're interested in proof, facts, and above all, risk." I opened the folder and slid one sheet across the table. It was a copy of a single transfer authorization, approved under a discretionary client program, dated 3 months prior. The amount? $480,000. The recipient? A shell account tied to a now-frozen project. And the signature at the bottom? Graham Thorne. He didn't touch the page, but I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. "I assume," he said carefully. "There's more where that came from." "There is," I replied. "And some of it is already in the hands of people who don't work here." His gaze sharpened. I let the words sit, not as a threat, but as a reality. I'm not here to negotiate," I said. "I'm here to clarify what happens next." He raised a brow. "You think you're in a position to do that?" "I think I'm the only person in this building who understands exactly how deep this goes and how cleanly it can be handled. If the board is willing to stop pretending Harold is salvageable." Graham didn't answer right away. He sat back, steepling his fingers. "The public hasn't named him yet." "They will." He nodded slowly. "And you? What about me?" "You're no longer with the company. Technically, why keep pushing?" I met his gaze. "Because I spent 8 years cleaning up other people's messes, and I'm not letting someone bury me under theirs. For the first time." He leaned back, his posture shifting. Not defensive, but thoughtful. "Let's say we believe you. Let's say this goes to a vote." I leaned forward. "You'll need to decide what matters more, protecting a man who lied to you, or preserving the company you've built your name on." Silence filled the room. Then he spoke again. "One condition," he said. I waited. "You don't go public with this. Not yet. Give us a chance to clean house from the inside." I considered it, then nodded. "As long as you clean all of it." I stood to leave, but just before I reached the door, Graham spoke again. "You're not the same as before." "No," I said, glancing back. "I finally learned the game you've all been playing." He nodded slowly, almost approvingly. "Good. You'll need to." Outside the boardroom, the air felt sharper. The hallway, once cold and silent, now felt different, like something had shifted, because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't just reacting, I was steering. And the red folder? It was no longer a warning. It was leverage, getting started. The email came 2 days after the boardroom meeting. This time, it had a subject line: Advisory proposal, immediate consideration requested. I didn't open it right away, not because I wasn't expecting it, but because I already knew what it would say. I let it sit in my inbox for exactly 11 minutes. Then I clicked. The message was formal, polished, and carefully stripped of any apology. It came from a board liaison, someone I hadn't spoken to directly in years, offering a contract for an advisory role to support ongoing internal investigations. It was dressed up with flattery, institutional knowledge, respected voice, trusted judgment, and urgency. They wanted me back, not as an employee, not as a threat, but as a symbol, a patch on the hole Harold had torn open. I read it twice, then once more, just to make sure I didn't miss what wasn't being said. There was no mention of how I left, no reference to the red folder, no acknowledgement that they had watched me be erased and said nothing. That was fine. I wasn't here for apologies. We scheduled a virtual meeting. The screen loaded. 4 faces greeted me, 3 board members and a neutral legal representative. Polite nods, measured smiles, every move calculated, like a chess match in slow motion. "Vivian," Graham Thorne began, "we want to express our appreciation for your integrity and your silence these past few days." I nodded once. I wasn't silent. I said, "I was careful." A pause. The legal rep offered a tight smile. "We believe your insight would be valuable in helping us rebuild trust with clients, with staff, with our partners, and with the press." I added. Another pause. No denial. They wanted to hire me as their cleanup crew. And maybe I would have said yes. Once. But not now. "I have conditions," I said calmly. 4 pairs of eyes shifted. "First," I continued, "you appoint an independent audit firm, one that reports directly to the board, not to the CEO or interim leadership." "Understood," Graham said. "Second," I added, "you make the results public. No redactions. No buried footnotes." The legal rep straightened slightly. "That could create legal exposure." "Transparency is always a risk," I said. "So is hiding corruption." Silence. Then, "What else?" "One more thing," I said. "I won't be accepting the role." The screen went still. "I've already begun forming a new advisory organization," I said. "One focused solely on ethical oversight in the finance sector. Independent, agile, uncompromised." Graham folded his hands. "That would make you a competitor." "No," I said. "It makes me a safeguard." They didn't argue. They couldn't. I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I wasn't stepping back into the system I'd just exposed. I was building something that couldn't be fired or silenced or shuffled aside. "We will still need your help navigating the public narrative," one board member offered. I nodded. "Send your questions through my office. We'll respond as appropriate." It was the cleanest reversal of power I'd ever experienced. Once, I had sat in front of this panel defending numbers, processes, and ethics no one had time to understand. Now, they were asking for my help because they had no idea how to rebuild without me. After the call ended, I sat back in my chair and looked out the window. There was no celebration, no satisfaction, just clarity. I hadn't won, but I'd taken control. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. The view from my new office wasn't grand. No skyline, no glass towers, just a quiet street lined with trees and the hum of a city getting on with its day. It was perfect. I sat with a mug of coffee, hot, strong, undisturbed, and opened the morning news on my tablet. The headline took up the entire top half of the screen. "Harold McCullen banned from corporate leadership indefinitely." Below it, a photo I hadn't seen in years, Harold, mid-stride, avoiding reporters as a mic hovered inches from his jaw. The article detailed the investigation, the client fallout, the board's swift removal, and the ethics violations that would bar him from holding executive authority in any publicly traded company again. It didn't mention me, and that was exactly how I wanted it. The fallout had moved faster than anyone predicted. Once the rival firm leaked the red folder's contents, clients had turned statements into ultimatums. The board had no choice but to act. Within a week, Harold was suspended. Within 2, terminated, and now, officially disqualified. The finance world, so slow to move on anything ethical, had made an example out of him. Some called it justice. I called it overdue. My new role wasn't a job. It was a choice. I had launched the Integrity Advisory Group, a small independent firm dedicated to proactive ethics oversight in the finance sector. No boards to silence us. No layers of approval to water down the truth. Just clean work and clean lines. We weren't big yet, just 6 people. But every one of them had a reason for being here, and not one of them had forgotten what it felt like to be silenced in the name of profit. I didn't need corner offices or fancy job titles anymore. I had something better. Control. At 9:22 in the morning, my assistant knocked gently and handed me a small envelope. No return address. Just my name written neatly in blue ink. I opened it. Inside was a folded thank you card. Handwritten, slightly smudged ink, like someone had written it in a rush. It read, "You don't know me, but I watched everything. I never spoke up. I wish I had. My daughter is 13, and after everything that happened, she said to me, I want to be like her someday. Thank you." I didn't recognize the handwriting. Didn't need to. Some things don't need signatures. I closed the card, held it gently between both hands, and sat still for a long moment. It wasn't pride I felt. It wasn't revenge. It was release. The quiet kind that comes when the weight lifts, not because the world fixed itself, but because you finally chose not to carry what wasn't yours. Harold had paid the price for what he built on lies, but the win wasn't his downfall. The win was knowing I didn't have to mirror him to bring him down. I stood, walked over to the window, and opened it just enough to let the breeze in, below. Someone was helping a little girl adjust her backpack. She grinned, pointed toward a nearby office. The adult, maybe her father, smiled and nodded. I smiled, too. Not because they knew who I was, but because I knew who I had become. And I liked her. A lot.